Alright, so there was one thing that came up yesterday right before I went to sleep that I wanted to talk about here. Because I didn't have time to actually go and post a video about it. Because literally, when I stopped stream at like, what was it, like 11 o'clock yesterday in the morning, I ended up spending all this time editing a video and doing all sorts of shit. Like the first time I tried to edit the last video about the gold boosting communities, I literally ended up trying to cut it in the highlights tool for Twitch, but unfortunately my sound on my computer started acting up, so I had to restart my computer, and I lost all that. So I said fuck it. I downloaded it and I edited it on the computer. So by the time I was done with that, and because YouTube taking forever to process the video, it wasn't up until like, 3 or 4 in the afternoon. So yeah, I didn't get much sleep for work yesterday, but fuck it, whatever. It is what it is. But yeah, this came out yesterday just as I was laying down for bed. And yeah, it looks like we are getting cross-faction groups, so we'll be able to do like raiding, raided battlegrounds, dungeons, so if you're playing on Horde, you might end up grouping with a gnome someday. So I'm just kind of gonna go over the post here real quick. I'll read it out. For years now, many players have questioned whether the rules restricting communication and cooperation between Alliance and Horde need to be so absolute. The faction divide could keep most friends from playing together, or cause players to feel that their faction leaves them with fewer opportunities to pursue their favorite group content. But these downsides have long been justified in order to preserve a central element of the Warcraft universe. It all began with a game called Warcraft Orcs and Humans, right? But to quote a one-time war chief of the Horde, times change. So one thing I want to say about this part here, I didn't really want to stop reading it very often here, but I just want to point out here, orcs and humans. So for the longest time, the title itself could be exchanged for, them working together, because it's and, not versus, and. So just something to think about there. I am pleased to announce that we are working on adding the ability for Alliance and Horde players to form pre-made parties together for dungeons, raids, and raided PvP. There have been 2 decades worth of code and content crafted with the assumption that parties can only have players of a single faction, and while we want to make this feature available as soon as possible, the extent of the change means that it couldn't be ready in time for the upcoming Eternity's End content update. Instead, we are planning to test and release it as a part of a subsequent 9.2.5 update. We're eager to hear your feedback about the details we're sharing today, and on the details of our implementation when this feature becomes available to the public test realm following the release of Eternity's End. So, basically what they're saying is they wanted to have it out with Eternity's End 9.2, but they couldn't. Makes sense. I mean, shit. In crafting the rule set for this feature, we were guided by 2 goals. Focus on organized instance gameplay. Dungeons, raids, and raided PvP have been at the center of the most compelling arguments for relaxing the faction divide. This content, that by definition requires a pre-made group, and thus social barriers, will have the greatest negative impact on people's ability to access these experiences on their preferred terms. Make this an opt-in feature as much as possible. In terms of in-world fiction and player preferences, there are decades of animosity to overcome. While we are excited to offer players the choice to reach across the faction divide and cooperate to overcome common foes, we know that there will be many who will react warily to this change, and we don't want to override those preferences. This is about increasing options for players, and that's good. That in itself is good. Now, there was something that I keep saying on, Twitter and stuff. Of course, you can only take Twitter for like you can't really take it seriously because a lot of people are just fucking idiots. But I see people posting all the time like, oh, this is going to ruin the core aspects of the game. It's like, no. The shit is fucking opt-in. You opt into grouping with these people. It's not something that you're being forced to do. If you are about to join a group and you're Horde, for example, and they're bringing in alliance players and stuff into the raid and stuff, if you don't like it, just fucking leave the group. Understand that there's a lot of people that have a lot of friends and stuff that play on the opposite faction who don't want to spend money to transfer their shit, and at the same time they may prefer the aesthetic of their character a lot. And there's so many different reasons why someone would play a specific faction. For me, I've always thought Horde was fucking awesome. Metal as fuck, you know, just brutal, just exactly what I like. But there's sometimes when I want to play Alliance too. There I've got a whole server on Airy Peak of Alliance characters that I play occasionally. Not a whole lot, because, you know, the guild I was in, it was one of those massive multi-guild conglomerates, and I just didn't really like a lot of the people I was having to read guild chat from a lot of times. I didn't really click with a lot of people. The raid teams that I was in, they weren't fun. It just wasn't fun. But I loved my characters, so they still exist. I just haven't played them. But yeah, if I could use those characters that I've worked hard on to play with, you know, my Horde friends, because I'll be honest, I've got more friends on Horde than I do on Alliance. I probably could count the number of friends I have on Alliance on one hand. So that being said, yeah, fucking, I love it because it's going to open up more opportunities for me. You know, and I don't have to spend money to transfer shit. I love that. Anyway, moving on. These guidelines led us to the following system. Players will be able to directly invite members of the opposite faction to a party if you have a battle tag or real ID friendship, or if you are members of a cross-faction WoW community. Great. What this is going to do is going to make cross-faction WoW communities actually be useful. These days, it's just a matter of, you know, in all the communities I've joined, nobody talks in them. They're an afterthought. And now this is actually going to make it to where, you know, people actually make use of the cross-faction WoW communities, I think. And so this is a big brain call, I think, in my opinion, to make that a part of that. So you don't have to have them on your battle tag or real ID. You just got to be in the same cross-faction community. Create a raiding community. Or treat the community like a guild, just unfortunately without all the perks that guilds provide. Moving on. Pre-made groups in the group finder listings for mythic dungeons, raids, or raided arena RBGs will be open to applicants of both factions, though the group leader may choose to restrict the listing to the same faction applicants if they so choose. Again, good choice. Choice is important. Guilds will remain single faction, and random match-made activities like heroic dungeons, skirmishes, or random battlegrounds will all remain same faction, both because there is less faction-driven pressure around random groups, and to avoid compromising the opt-in nature of the feature by randomly placing a queuing orc in a group with a night elf. That makes sense. Just imagine queuing up for a heroic, and you're playing as an undead, and you got a night elf in your group, and that night elf is on an RP server, and that night elf decides they don't like you because your faction leader burned Teldrassil, and they choose to not heal you because, you know, they're the healer in the group naturally. That's how that would probably end up working out. And so they're going to let you die every chance you get. And you're doing the run of shame every time, all for the sake of randomized groups. Wouldn't that be horrible? I would fucking hate that, dude. Once in a party together, members of the opposite faction will remain unfriendly while in the outdoor world, and fully hostile in war mode. Good. As it should. As they do today, though they will be able to communicate through party chat. Upon entering a dungeon, raid, or raided PvP match, however, all members will be friendly and able to assist each other in combat, trade loot, earn shared achievements, and otherwise fully cooperate the same way members of the same faction have always been able to. That is awesome. At least they're adding the ability to also share loot. Like, if something drops for someone, wouldn't that feel awful? If they're like, oh, sorry, dude, I can't trade it to you because, other faction. Sorry. Damn, that would suck. That would be horrible. A major goal in announcing the feature in advance is to make sure we're capturing all the expectations and requirements for this to be a smooth experience. A group raiding, doing mythic keys, or chasing higher PvP ratings should be able to operate seamlessly whether they're same faction or cross-faction group. This functionality will also apply to legacy instances, and this is available at all levels, though there will be several older instances that cross-faction parties cannot enter, at least for now. Battle of Dazar'alor, Trial of the Crusader, Ice Crown Citadel. Remember that gunship battle? Yep. And you guys break it every time you guys make a change, so hopefully you don't do it this time. And a handful of others that similarly have extensive faction-specific components that will have to be reworked to support cross-faction parties. Just do what, Battle of Dazar'alor and a few other dungeons do, and just make people of the opposite faction from the group leader into characters of the other faction in those dungeons. And then you can just do it however. It works out. I would think, even though I'm sure Worgen would hate to look like a goblin or however they do the race changing on that. I mean, that could work out. Then it's not a big issue. There are likely those who have read this far with some unease, worried that this was chipping away at a foundational principle of Warcraft. No! That shit has been chipped away years ago when they started having storylines with fucking Jaina and Thrall. You know how long ago that was? A long time ago. Really long time ago. Jaina and Thrall have been buddies for years, okay? And nobody has said a fucking word about that. People love Green Jesus a whole lot, and they loved Jaina and Thrall so much that they've made fanfics of the two doing things together that I won't ever speak of out loud. I mean, literally, it's one of those things that, over the years, that whole faction divide has slowly ceased to be a thing. And the only thing that's been stopping it is idiots who don't realize that, you can still do PvP content just fine in open world stuff and give people the option to work together. And, of course, devs claiming, the story doesn't allow for it. I mean, you could literally do it. It's doable. I mean, hell, I can see on RP realms, them allowing, groups to form together of cross-faction stuff, just so they can create, bands of pirates and stuff. Because, pirates in this game, they're cross-faction. Haven't you noticed trolls walking around with all the pirates and stuff? You got the humans and the elves and all that stuff, and the trolls and all that, walking around together, the gnomes and all that. Go look at all the pirates in the game, and you will literally see cross-faction stuff. I could see that being opened up more in the future. And it would be cool if it did. Just a little bit, at least. So make them the same faction as the group leader. That's all you gotta do. And that's just temporary change, At BlizzCon in 2019, when an attendee asked about cross-faction play, we responded at the time that Alliance and Horde separation is a pillar that makes Warcraft Warcraft. But upon reflection, that's an oversimplification. Alliance and Horde identity is what is fundamental to Warcraft. And while at times that identity has been one of division and open conflict, we've seen Alliance and Horde finding common ground and working together ever since Warcraft 3. Told you. Notably including the last time a Warcraft chapter was named Eternity's End. See? And the instances of cooperation in World of Warcraft itself are too numerous to count. We're hopeful that these changes will serve to actually strengthen faction identity and by allowing more players to play the faction whose values, aesthetic, and characters they find more compelling, rather than feeling forced to choose between their personal preference and the ability to play with friends. Following the events of Battle for Azeroth, the Alliance and Horde are poised in an uneasy armistice. The factions still stand apart, and even as some of their leaders cooperate in the Shadowlands, countless members of each faction will neither forgive nor forget the wartime actions of the other. For every Jaina, there's a Gen, and that seems unlikely to change anytime soon. But why shouldn't players be able to make that choice for themselves, especially in cooperative settings where the story revolves around coming together to overcome dire threats? We look forward to hearing your thoughts and feedback on this feature both now and once it arrives for testing in the 9.2.5 PTR. We'll see you in Azeroth. So, I'm pretty sure I've already made my thoughts pretty clear, but I will reiterate just for the sake of clarity. I think that cross-faction play is perfect. It's a great idea. Again, there have been factions all around in the game, all NPCs, mind you, but there's been factions throughout the game that have had cross-faction characters. In fact, they don't even identify with factions in a lot of instances, particularly with the pirates, like I was mentioning before. They have their own little faction. And so, by allowing people to have this, I can see a lot more doors opening up in the future for like RP elements and things like that. Now, mind you, war mode will always exist, and I feel like war mode needs to stay separated in a lot of those cases. So them only doing it for instance content right now makes a whole lot of sense. However, if you are playing without war mode on, I can see them in the future allowing groups to form together with war mode off. And being out in the open world together and communicating in the party and all that stuff. I can see that happening, and that would be a great idea. And then anytime someone tries to make a change to war mode, it can put a little message in chat that says, you must leave this party to turn on war mode, or something like that. Or maybe just send them off to their own little parallel universe, whatever. But or maybe just in war mode, maybe they kill each other, whatever. It is what it is. Either way, in the world, just being in a party and being able to communicate together, work together, maybe all the dumb things I just said aside, because I know I said some dumb stuff just now. Maybe what they could do is when you're in a party in the open world, when you have war mode off and you do quests together, you can also accumulate the credit for that quest. Maybe it will make tagging of mobs a little bit less of a problem, because if a horde player tags a mob, an alliance player can't get any credit for that mob unless it's one of those very rare cases where it's a specific type of NPC that does share credit across multiple factions, which I always appreciate those in particular because it makes doing the quest a whole lot easier. I'm always down for cooperating with the opposite faction if it means getting a means to the ends. I don't care anything about the PvP. I'll do PvP when I opt into it all the time. Hell, when I play in war mode, I usually leave the opposite faction alone unless they attack me first. In which case, that usually leaves me open for attack quite frequently because when I'm leveling up, I'm usually in war mode and I usually get my poo pushed in, if one could apply a derogative idea for how bad it is. So, yeah, that's a great development. I am happy that they did this. Anybody that is upset with this needs to get their head examined, because literally right up here it says this, making an opt-in feature. Everything about this is totally opt-in. You don't have to use the feature at all if you don't want. So, you know what? If you don't want to do it, fuck off and do your own thing. Whatever. Who cares? You do you. We'll do whatever we want to do. So, don't try and shit in everyone else's cereal just because you don't like the taste. Anyway, thank you guys for watching. This has been Sir Onion Knight, and I'll see you guys around. Also, check me out on Twitch. I'm going to be going live here eventually at the time of recording this. I got to edit it down first, but then when I'm done editing it and posting it on YouTube, I'm going to go live on Twitch. So, yeah. Anyway, see you guys later.